The Georgia sun bore down mercilessly on the sprawling grounds of Fort Benning. The air shimmered with heat, rising off the concrete like waves from an invisible ocean. Recruits stood stiffly in formation, sweat soaking through their fatigues, but no one dared shift under the scrutinizing eyes of the drill instructors. Among the sea of shaved heads and squared shoulders stood Private Elena Ramirez. Her dark hair was pulled tightly beneath her cap, her expression calm, though her heart thudded with restless energy. She was the only woman in her unit, and she knew every eye, friendly, doubtful, hostile, flicked toward her whenever the opportunity arose. It was nothing new. Elena had grown up in southern Texas, the eldest daughter of migrant farm workers. She had learned responsibility before. She learned how to spell it. Fixing tractors, patching irrigation lines, and hauling feed weren't women's work. But when her father's back gave out, she stepped in without complaint. She learned to work with steel, dirt, and sweat. She learned grit before she learned ambition, and now that grit was all she had. A commanding voice broke through her thoughts. "Recruits!" Colonel Harris's bark carried over the parade ground, sharp and cutting. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, his uniform as crisp as the creases in his beliefs. And one of those beliefs, never spoken officially, but whispered in every corner, was that women had no place in combat. Elena had read about him before. She arrived. Old school, some said. A relic, said others. But relics still held power, especially in a world where every mistake was magnified under scrutiny. "Step forward, draw your weapons," Harris commanded. The armory officers wheeled out racks of rifles. One by one, recruits stepped forward, calling out their names, receiving their weapons, and returning to formation. The metallic clink of Vinkov steel filled the air, sharp and purposeful. When Elena's name was called, she stepped forward. Private Ramirez. The officer handed her an M4 carbine. She felt the weight settle into her hands, familiar, reassuring. She had trained on weapons before, though never in such a high-stakes environment. Still, something about this rifle felt off. The grip was slightly loose, the chamber stiff, the stock rattling more than it should. She adjusted it, her fingers running instinctively across the barrel, trigger, and receiver. She frowned. This wasn't right. "Problem, Private?" Harris's voice sliced the air, dripping with mockery. "No, sir," Elena said quickly, straightening. Harris smirked, eyes narrowing. "Good, because if there's one thing we don't need in my unit, it's excuses. You're either a soldier or you're dead weight. Understood?" "Yes, sir." The exchange drew muffled chuckles from nearby recruits. Elena ignored them, but her jaw tightened. Back in formation, she kept her rifle at the ready. Sweat rolled down her neck, but her mind was sharp, turning over the subtle flaws in the weapon. On the farm, when a machine sounded wrong, it usually meant sabotage or neglect. Here, in the army, it could mean something worse. The day's drills began, running, crawling, shouting, firing. When her turn came to shoot at the range, Elena stepped forward with steady hands. She lined up her target, breathing slow. "Squeeze, don't pull," she reminded herself. The rifle barked once. The recoil hit her shoulder. Then, silence. She pressed the trigger again. Nothing. The weapon jammed. "Clear it," an instructor barked. Elena worked quickly, unjamming the round and resetting. She fired again. One shot, then another jam. The laughter started behind her, low and poisonous. Figures. Guess Daddy's tractor skills don't help much now. She can't even shoot. Colonel Harris stood with arms crossed, smirk wide. "Private Ramirez, do you intend to entertain us all day? Or are you planning on hitting something?" Elena's cheeks burned, but her eyes stayed on the target. She cleared the chamber again, reloaded and squeezed. The round struck low, nowhere near the bullseye. She didn't flinch. Didn't give him the satisfaction. One by one, she forced each bullet out, unjamming, firing, unjamming, firing. Her hands grew raw, knuckles scraped, but she never quit. By the end of the drill, her target was a patchwork of missed shots and scattered holes. Useless to anyone. But her. Harris clapped his hands sarcastically. Well done, Ramirez. If the enemy ever needs comic relief, we'll be sure to send you first. The unit roared with laughter. Helena lowered her rifle. Her arms trembled, not from weakness, but from fury. That night, in the barracks, the humiliation replayed in her head. She sat cross-legged on her bunk, the rifle spread in pieces before her like a puzzle. Springs, bolts, barrel, chamber, each part she examined with steady hands, searching for the flaw. It didn't take long to find it. The firing pin was worn nearly smooth. The chamber edge was filed ever so slightly, enough to force a jam. Under pressure, this wasn't neglect, it was deliberate. Someone had given her a broken rifle. Her chest tightened. She thought of Harris's smirk, the way the other recruits had laughed, the weight of expectation pressing down on her shoulders. She could complain, file a report, but who would believe her? Harris controlled the narrative. And even if she proved sabotage, the damage was done. She'd already been marked as weak. So she kept silent. Instead, she cleaned. She adjusted. She practiced, over and over, until her fingers knew the weapon's stubborn rhythm. She would learn to work with the flaw. She would make the broken thing bend to her will. Around her, the barracks buzzed with laughter, card games, idle chatter. A few recruits glanced her way, some with pity, some with disdain, one or two with curiosity. But none approached. Hours passed. Midnight crept closer. Still, Elena sat, sweat dripping, hands raw, rifle gleaming under dim light. Finally, she leaned back, exhausted. Her reflection in the darkened window stared back, a woman on the edge of proving everyone wrong. She whispered to herself, soft and steady, "They think they buried me today. Tomorrow, I'll climb out." And for the first time since stepping onto the parade ground, she allowed herself a thin smile. This wasn't defeat. This was the beginning. The morning bugle split the silence of the barracks like a knife. Private Elena Ramirez rolled out of her bunk before most others had even stirred. Her body ached from yesterday's drills. Her palms were tender, red, and blistered from forcing. Her weapon threw jam after jam. She flexed her fingers, wincing, then reached immediately for the rifle, leaning against her bed. It had been cleaned thoroughly, every bolt gleaming in the faint pre-dawn light. But she knew the truth. The firing pin was nearly worthless. The chamber holtered. Her rifle was broken, and someone had wanted it that way. Still, it was hers. The barracks filled with groans and shuffling boots as the other recruits scrambled. Up, someone muttered, "Early bird again," glancing toward her with a smirk. Another, a tall blonde kid from Kentucky named Jensen, added, "Don't matter how early she starts. Won't fix a thing." Laughter followed, but it was weak, tired. Elena said nothing. She was already stripping the rifle down, hands moving with practiced precision. She could field strip it in less than 30 seconds now, her muscle memory. Sharp from hours of practice. Each part she laid out on her bunk like sacred tools, then reassembled, clicking the final pin into place as the instructors burst in. "On your feet, recruits!" Boots thundered against the floor. The day began with PT, push-ups, sprints, weighted runs beneath the merciless Georgia sun. Sweat poured down Elena's back, soaking her uniform, but she pushed harder. Each rep, each step, was an answer to Harris's smirk. When they reached the range, her heart sank slightly. More shooting drills. More laughter, expense. She braced herself. Colonel Harris was already there, arms folded, sunglasses hiding his eyes, but not the contempt on his face. He barked, "Line up." One by one, recruits stepped forward, rifles cracking sharp across the range. Targets splintered, bullseyes shredded. Then came Elena's turn. She loaded her magazine carefully, ignoring the whispers behind her. Bet she jams on the first round. She'll cry this time. Watch. She didn't cry. She squeezed the trigger. One sharp crack, then silence. The chamber jammed. The laughter exploded. Elena kept her eyes on the target, jaw clenched. She dropped the magazine, cleared the chamber, slammed it back, fired again. Another jam. "Private Ramirez," Harris drawled, his voice carrying across the range. "Would you like us to fetch a wrench for you? Or maybe your sewing kit?" More laughter. Even some instructors smirked. Elena ignored them all. Fire, jam, clear, fire, jam, clear. Her hands worked in a rhythm now, blisters tearing open, blood smearing faintly across the steel. Every shot that left the barrel landed wide, scattered across the target. Worthless to everyone else, but to her, it was progress. When her turn ended, she lowered the rifle slowly, breathing hard. Her target looked like a storm of random holes. No pattern, no skill, just noise. The recruits chuckled, shaking their heads, but one didn't. A wiry kid named Thompson, from Chicago, glanced at her hands as she passed. They were raw, scraped, and trembling. He looked back at her face, calm, steady, unreadable. Something in him shifted. He didn't say a word, but later, when he sat polishing his boots in the barracks, he caught himself thinking, she didn't quit, not once. That night, Elena worked on her rifle again. Her bunkmate, Martinez, leaned over, curious. "You know, it's busted, right? You're wasting time." Elena didn't look up. "And I'll waste it better than anyone else." Martinez frowned, but didn't push. Hours passed. Elena's fingers grew clumsy from exhaustion. She forced herself to keep going. The smell of gun oil clung to her uniform, seeping into her skin. Each click of the chamber became a heartbeat, steady, relentless. Finally, near midnight, she stopped. She sat in silence, staring at the weapon in her lap. Her reflection stared. Back from the steel, eyes dark, tired, but alive. She whispered softly, "You won't beat me." The following days blurred into routine, sweat, humiliation, repetition. At the range, the pattern repeated. Fire, jam, clear. Harris never missed a chance to mock her. Ramirez, if I wanted a clown, I'd have called the circus. At least, they hit what they aim at. The men laughed, though not all as loudly now, because some were starting to notice. When they crawled through mud under live fire drills, Elena never hesitated. When they sprinted obstacle courses, she pushed until her lungs burned, beating recruits who had laughed at her. In the barracks, she worked long after lights out, stripping her rifle again and again, hands shaking but steady. And slowly, quietly, the laughter softened. Not because she proved herself yet, her rifle still failed her daily, but because persistence was harder to mock than weakness. One evening, after a grueling day, Thompson stopped by her bunk. He didn't look at her directly, just muttered, "He's harder on you than anyone else." Elena didn't pause from cleaning her weapon. "Good, means I'll get better faster." Thompson smirked faintly. "Or you'll break." She glanced up, meeting his eyes. "Then I'll break differently." He didn't understand, but he nodded. The truth was, Elena did feel the weight. Each insult chipped at her. Each laugh left a scar. But she carried them like stones in a rucksack, heavy, exhausting, but strengthening her shoulders all the same. One night, she unfolded a scrap of paper and wrote to her younger sister Aina, back in Texas. They gave me a broken rifle. They laugh every day, but I'm still standing. If they try to bury me in failure, I'll climb out with my bare hands. Don't worry. Don't be ashamed of me. One day, I'll write you about a win. She folded it carefully, tucking it beneath her pillow. The letter wasn't just for Aina. It was for herself. The next morning, during drills, Harris stopped her personally. "Ramirez," he said, voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Do you know why you're here?" "To train, sir." "No," he sneered. "You're here to prove a point. For the politicians who want women in foxholes. And I'll make sure that point fails. You're a distraction, a liability, and a joke." The words cut sharper than she expected. But instead of bowing her head, she straightened, looking him directly in the eye. "Sir, then I'll be the hardest joke you've ever had to explain." A stunned silence followed. Harris's jaw tightened. He barked, "Drop and give me 50. Elena dropped instantly, palms slamming the hot ground. Each push-up sent fire through her arms, reopening blisters. But she kept going. By the time she finished, chest heaving, she caught sight of Thompson again. This time, he was grinning faintly, shaking his head. For the first time, she wasn't entirely alone. The rifle was still broken. Her hands were still bleeding. Harris still hated her, but something had shifted. Respect was growing, small, fragile, but real. And Elena Ramirez wasn't about to let it die. The mess hall was louder than usual. Metal trays clattered, boots scuffed against concrete, and voices mingled in the air like static. Recruits huddled in clusters, laughing, trading jokes, blowing off steam from the relentless grind of training. But beneath the noise, a sharper current hummed, a single word moving from mouth to mouth, growing stronger with each telling. Exercise. A major field exercise was coming. Not a drill in the controlled chaos of the range or obstacle course, but a full squad simulation in the forests outside Fort Benning. The kind of exercise designed to mimic combat as closely as possible without live ammunition. The kind of exercise that broke soldiers who weren't ready. Elena sat alone at the far end of a table, picking at the bland mashed potatoes on her tray. She didn't need to hear the whispers to know they were about her. She won't last an hour out there. Bet she trips over her own rifle. Harris'll chew her alive. She kept her eyes on her food, shoulders squared. Each word slid past her like grit in the wind. But inside, her stomach twisted. For weeks, she had endured Harris's mockery and the rifle's betrayal. For weeks, she had forced herself to keep firing, keep unjamming, keep fighting the laughter. Persistence had earned her a few wary glances of respect from men like Thompson, but respect was fragile, brittle as glass. The exercise would either shatter it completely or forge it into something unbreakable. Colonel Harris chose that moment to stride into the mess hall. His voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Listen up, recruits." Instant silence. "We've got a field exercise scheduled for tomorrow. Full simulation. Enemy ambushes, tactical maneuvers, leadership tests. Some of you will rise, some of you will break. That's the point. War doesn't give you second chances." His gaze swept this room. It landed, inevitably, on Elena. His smirk was subtle but sharp. "Some of you," he added, "should be grateful this is just training." Laughter rippled across the room. Elena forced herself not to react. Her fork scraped against the tray. As she kept eating, bite after bite, though her appetite had long fled. That night in the barracks, the mood was electric. Recruits checked their gear, polished boots, folded maps. Conversations buzzed about who would take point, who would cover flanks, who would collapse first. Some boasted, some worried. Elena sat quietly on her bunk, rifle across her lap. She field-stripped it again, fingers working with mechanical precision. Click, slide, twist, lock. She knew its flaws better than she knew her own scars now. She knew it would jam. It always jammed, but she refused to let that paralyze her. Martinez, her bunkmate, leaned over. "You nervous?" Elena capped, her eyes on the weapon. "Everyone should be nervous." "Yeah, but," Martinez hesitated. "They're all betting against you, Ramirez. Harris, too. You know that, right?" Elena's hands stilled for a moment. Then she smiled faintly. "Not looking up, and they'll lose their bets." Martinez shook his head, half amused, half impressed. "You're crazy." "Maybe," Elena said, "but I'm still here." When lights out came, Elena didn't sleep. The barracks quieted, snores rising from bunks, but she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The weight of expectation pressed down like a stone. Finally, she sat up, reaching for the small notebook she kept hidden in her footlocker. She opened it, smoothing the worn pages, and began to write. "Ana, tomorrow we have our first real test. Harris wants me to fail. He wants to prove I don't belong. Everyone expects me to crumble, and maybe I will. Maybe I'll fall on my face in the mud. Maybe I'll freeze. Maybe the rifle will jam at the worst moment, and everyone will laugh. But even if all that happens, I'll get back up. I'll keep moving, because failure is only permanent if you stay down. If they try to bury me, I'll claw my way out. I promise you that." She set the pencil down, staring at the words until they blurred. Then she tore the page free, folded it carefully, and slipped it under her pillow. The next morning dawned gray, heavy clouds hanging low over the base. The recruits gathered at the staging area, gear strapped tight, rifles slung across shoulders. Nervous energy buzzed among them, a mix of fear and bravado. Elena stood at the edge of the formation, her rifle digging into her shoulder. The weight felt heavier than usual, but her grip was steady. Colonel Harris stood before them, hands clasped behind his back, eyes hidden behind mirrored sunglasses. He looked like a man already confident of the outcome. "Today," he said, "you will learn what it means to fight under pressure. You will learn who among you can lead, and who among you should never be trusted with men's lives." He paused, letting the silence linger. "Follow orders, stay sharp, and remember, mistakes out there could mean death in the real world. Don't embarrass yourselves, or me." He let his gaze linger on Elena, one beat longer than anyone else. Then he barked, "Move out." The squads formed up, boots pounding the dirt as they marched toward the waiting trucks. Engines rumbled, exhaust fumes mixing with the damp morning air. Recruits piled in, helmets bumping, rifles clattering. The ride to the training grounds was filled with forced laughter and nervous jokes. But Elena sat silently, staring out the back of the truck. The trees blurred past in endless green, each mile pulling her closer to the test she had been dreading and craving. Harris sat at the front, barking orders, his voice rising above the engine noise. Elena tuned him out. She focused on her breathing, steady and slow. When the trucks finally jolted to a stop, the recruits spilled out into the forest. The air was damp, thick with the smell of pine and earth. The ground was soft under their boots, muffling their movements. Elena tightened her grip on her rifle. The broken weapon felt almost alive in her hands, a burden and a challenge both. She thought of Ana. She thought of the letter under her pillow. She thought of Harris's smirk, of every laugh, of every whisper. And she whispered back to herself, so softly no one could hear, "Not today." The whistle blew. The exercise began. The forest swallowed them whole. Damp earth muffled the thud of boots, and the thick canopy filtered the gray morning light into fractured beams. Every breath tasted of pine and damp soil. The recruits moved in staggered formation, rifles ready, helmets heavy, packs digging into their shoulders. The air was tense, taut as a bowstring, waiting to snap. At the front, Colonel Harris walked with an air of authority, barking commands that echoed louder than necessary. "Spread out, eyes up, don't drag your damn feet like farmers." Elena. Ramirez marched in the middle of her squad, rifle pressed tight against her chest. The weight of it was both comfort and curse. She knew what would happen the moment she pulled the trigger. One shot, maybe two, then a jam. And Harris would be there, ready to pounce with mockery. But fear wasn't an option. The whistle blew from somewhere unseen, shrill and sharp. Smoke. Grenades hissed, filling the air with white fog that curled around the trees. Shouts erupted. Gunfire cracked in bursts. The simulation had begun. Contact front. Someone yelled. The squad dropped instantly, boots sinking into mud, rifles raised. Harris crouched behind a log, barking orders. Push left flank. Ramirez, cover fire. Elena's heart hammered. She sighted down her rifle, finger on the trigger. The barrel barked once, a clean, sharp shot, before the weapon locked stiff in her hands. Click. Jam. Laughter erupted immediately from two recruits nearby. "She's down already." Elena ignored them. She forced the magazine out, cleared the chamber. With practiced speed and reloaded. Another shot fired, another jam. Her palms stung, blisters reopening beneath her gloves. She worked mechanically calmly as the chaos swirled. The smoke thickened. Simulated enemies, instructors in red armbands, moved like shadows through. The trees, shouting orders, firing blanks. The squad returned fire in bursts, but their aim scattered. Harris's voice cut through the din, angry, impatient. "Ramirez! Keep up or get out of my sight." Elena didn't answer. She steadied. Her rifle aimed and fired again. The shot struck wide, but it forced an enemy to duck behind cover. Her squad surged forward, taking the gap. For the first time, no one laughed. The fight pushed deeper into the woods. Branches whipped across faces, mud splashed boots. Rifles cracked in uneven rhythm. Elena moved low, every sense alert. Her rifle betrayed her with every other pull, but she adapted, timing her reloads to the squad's volleys, using each single shot as a signal, not a weapon. It was instinctive. One shot meant push left, another meant cover right. She hadn't planned it, but her squadmates began to notice. Ramirez fired left shift. Thompson shouted once, dragging another recruit with him. It worked. The squad moved smoother, more coordinated, not because of Harris's booming orders, but because of the rhythm Elena had carved into the chaos. Harris didn't see it. He was too busy yelling. "Advance, faster, damn it. Don't let them box." Shoes in. But his commands clashed, leaving gaps. One moment he ordered them forward, the next to hold. Recruits stumbled, confused. Elena filled the silence. Hand signals, sharp, clean, learned from hunting trips with her father. 2 fingers. Move left. Fist closed, hold position. Point forward, advance quietly. Her squad followed almost without realizing it. The broken rifle forced her hands to stay free more often, and those gestures became lifelines. A simulated burst of fire rained down from a ridge ahead. Harris roared. "Charge it! Take the hill!" Elena froze. Charging blind uphill was suicide, even in simulation. The enemy had the high ground. Recruits hesitated, fear flickering across their faces. But Harris was already halfway up, shouting back, "Move, damn you! Do you want to lose?" No one moved. Elena crouched low, eyes scanning. The ridge wasn't wide. A flanking route curved around the right, hidden by thick brush. It would take longer, but it was smarter. She raised her hand, gesturing sharply. Thompson caught it, eyes narrowing. He hesitated, then nodded. He tugged two others with him, following Elena into the brush. They circled wide, moving silently, while Harris screamed from the hill, "Cowards! You'll never make soldiers this way." A squad that followed Harris took heavy simulated fire, their sensors buzzing to mark casualties. They stumbled, cursed, fell back down the hill. Harris's face turned crimson. Meanwhile, Elena's small team crept up the flank. She paused, raised her rifle. One shot cracked, shattering the stillness. Not at the enemy, at a low branch above them. The branch crashed down with a snap, startling the red armband instructors. Her squad surged forward, seizing the ridge before the enemy recovered. Blanks crackled, smoke burned, voices shouted. Seconds later, it was over. The ridge was theirs. Thompson looked at Elena, breathless. Hell of a move. Elena said nothing, only reloaded her rifle with steady hands. When Harris reached the ridge, his jaw tightened at the sight. His squad, the one that had disobeyed him, stood tall. His authority had cracked, though he refused to admit it. "Lucky break," he barked. "Don't think this means anything. You follow my orders, not hers." But the recruits exchanged glances, not openly rebellious, not yet, but different. They had seen something Harris hadn't. As the simulation pushed deeper, Elena's role grew. Her rifle remained her enemy, jamming relentlessly, but her calm under fire spread like wildfire. When Harris shouted contradictory orders, men hesitated, then followed her signals instead. Each move was small. A flanking gesture, a crouch signal, a single shot marking an opening. But small things became patterns, and patterns became trust. By the time the whistle blew, signaling the exercise's halfway point, sweat poured down Elena's back, mud caked her boots, and her hands throbbed from constant clearing. But her squad, the same men who once laughed, now glanced her way in silence, waiting. Colonel Harris saw it too. His glare lingered longer than usual. For the first time, Elena Ramirez had not just survived the chaos. She had led within it. And Harris hated her for it. The forest was no longer quiet. Smoke still hung low between the trees, twisting like ghosts. The smell of gunpowder mixed with pine and mud, and the recruits' faces were streaked with sweat and grime. The morning had stretched into a long blur of simulated combat, and every one of them felt the weight in their legs and lungs. Colonel Harris marched at the head of the squad, voice booming. "Pick it up. We move faster or we die faster." But no one seemed eager to quicken their pace. The last hour had drained them, not just their bodies, but their trust. Harris had led 2 direct assaults that ended in disaster. Sensors had buzzed on multiple recruits, marking them as casualties. Some had limped back to base, humiliated. Others had scowled at Harris's reckless orders. Still, he pretended nothing was wrong. "You're all weak," he barked. "Ramirez could carry more weight than half of you, as she can't even fire straight." The insult rolled off Elena like rain. By now she had learned his mockery was just noise. She kept her eyes forward, scanning the tree line. Her rifle hung heavy, useless for sustained fire, but it had taught her something more valuable: patience. They reached a clearing where the ground sloped downward into a ravine. Across the way, a small rise was dotted with sandbag fortifications and camouflaged tarps. The red armband instructors were dug in, waiting. Harris grinned, the kind of grin that meant trouble. "This is it," he declared. "We charge, overwhelm, and take their position. Show them what real soldiers look like." The recruits froze. A frontal assault across open ground? Everyone could see it was suicide. The ravine offered no cover, and the enemy held the high ground. "Sir," Thompson spoke up, voice cautious, "we'll be slaughtered before we're halfway across." "Silence," Harris snapped. "You think you know tactics better than me? You'll do as ordered." Elena studied the terrain. The ravine wasn't the only path. To the right, dense thickets formed a natural screen. It would take time to circle, but the cover was solid. To the left, the ground rose into a ridge that overlooked the enemy's flank. Two squads working together could box the defenders in. But Harris didn't care about strategy. He cared about domination. "On my mark," he barked. "We charge together. Bayonets out if you have to. Fear is your enemy. Kill it before it kills you." He raised his fist. The squad braced, hearts pounded. And Elena's hand shot up. Wait. It wasn't loud, but it was firm enough to stop several in their tracks. Harris's head whipped around, eyes blazing. "What did you say, Ramirez?" She pointed toward the thickets. "There's cover to the right. We can flank them, divide their focus." Harris sneered. "You questioning me again?" "I'm pointing out an option, sir." His jaw clenched. For a moment, Elena thought, he might strike her. Instead, he leaned close, voice low and venomous. "You think you're clever, don't you? That broken toy in your hands doesn't make you a tactician. When I say charge, you charge." He turned back, raising his fist again. But hesitation rippled through the squad. Eyes darted between Harris and Elena. The fear of open ground was written on every face. "Sir," another recruit muttered, "maybe Ramirez has a point." "Shut it." Harris roared. "I am your commander. You obey or you're finished." His voice echoed across the ravine, and that echo was answered. From the hilltop, bursts of simulated fire rained down. Sensors lit up on two recruits instantly. They collapsed into the mud, groaning in frustration. The ambush had begun. "Down!" Elena shouted instinctively, throwing herself into the dirt. The squad dove for cover at the tree line, bullets whipping over their heads. Harris stood exposed, bellowing like a madman. "On your feet! Charge, damn you!" No one moved. The ravine was a death trap, and everyone knew it. Elena's mind raced. She couldn't outshout Harris, but she could outthink him. She snapped, her fingers at Thompson, signaling toward the right flank. Without hesitation, he nodded and pulled two others with him, crawling low through the thickets. Another burst of fire erupted, but the smoke and rush masked their movement. Elena fired a single shot. Jam, reload, shot again. Each crack was deliberate, drawing enemy attention toward her position. It wasn't much, but it gave Thompson's team cover to advance. Recruits nearby noticed. One by one, they shifted, following Elena's signals. Open palms to hold. Two fingers slicing forward to advance. Quick points toward gaps in fire. Soon half the squad had peeled off into the brush, leaving Harris shouting into emptiness. "Cowards," he roared. "You'll all wash out." But, even as he screamed, the flankers broke through the enemy's blind spot. A sharp yell signaled their success. The defenders scrambled, caught off guard, their formation crumbling. Elena surged forward with the rest, covering the final push. Her rifle locked again, but she didn't falter. She dropped into the mud, clearing it with quick, practiced hands, before firing one last shot that clipped an instructor's sensor squarely. The whistle blew. The hill was theirs. Silence fell, broken only by heavy breathing. Recruits exchanged. Glances wide-eyed. The impossible had become possible, not by Harris's charge, but by Elena's quiet defiance. Harris stomped up the hill, face flush with rage. "Don't think for a second this was your doing," he growled. "I led this. I gave the order. You just followed." But no one looked at him. Their eyes were on Elena, and that burned Harris more than any defeat. The afternoon dragged on. More skirmishes scattered through the woods. Harris grew more erratic, barking contradictory orders, punishing hesitation. But the squad had tasted something different: competence. Without openly rebelling, they leaned toward Elena's subtle cues. Once, Harris ordered them forward into a bog, insisting it was the quickest route. Elena shook her head, gesturing them left toward firmer ground. Half the squad followed her, the other half obeyed Harris. Minutes later, Harris's group floundered knee-deep in mud, sensors buzzing as they were ambushed. By evening, Harris's authority had cracked completely. At camp, the recruits huddled around small rations, boots off, shoulders slumped. Elena sat quietly at the edge, cleaning her rifle for the 100th time. Thompson dropped beside her, exhaustion plain on his face. "You saved us today," he said simply. Elena didn't look up. "We saved each other." He chuckled softly. "Maybe, but without you, we'd be ghost numbers on Harris's scoreboard." Others nearby nodded, murmuring agreement. For the first time, the squad saw her not as the joke with the broken weapon, but as something more. And Harris saw it too, from across the firelight. His eyes glowed with simmering hatred. He had lost them. Not officially, not on paper. But where it mattered most, in loyalty, they no longer belonged to him. That night, Elena lay awake in her tent, staring at the canvas ceiling. Every muscle ached, every blister burned, yet her mind refused to rest. She had not asked for leadership. She had not wanted to challenge Harris. All she'd done was refuse to give in to fear. And somehow, that had made her a leader. Outside, an owl hooted. The forest was still alive, still watching. The exercise wasn't over. Tomorrow would bring new battles. But something inside her had shifted. She was no longer the recruit with the broken rifle. She was the recruit who had kept her squad alive, and Harris would never forgive her for it. The morning fog was thick, curling between the trees like silent predators. Every sound seemed amplified: the snap of a twig, the drip of dew from leaves, the quiet rustle of gear against fatigues. Colonel Harris glared at the squad from the ridge above. His face was tight with fury, jaw clenched so hard it seemed his teeth might crack. The previous day's flanking maneuver, Elena's decisive leadership, had humiliated him, and he wasn't about to let it happen again. "Listen up," Harris shouted, voice cutting through the mist. "Today's the final test. You will advance into hostile territory, engage, and neutralize the enemy at all costs. Private Ramirez." He let the pause stretch, the words dripping with venom. "You will take point." Gasps ran through the recruits. Harris was openly setting her up. To lead in the front line was to invite disaster. Elena's stomach twisted, but her expression remained calm. She gripped the rifle, her cursed weapon, and nodded. "Yes, sir." The squad moved out. Mist clung to the trees, hiding every inch of the forest, every shadow a potential enemy. The ground was uneven, strewn with roots and slick with mud from overnight rain. Every step required care. The first sign of danger came quickly. Red armband instructors emerged from cover, blank rounds sparking against trees. The squad froze. "Engage!" Harris barked from the ridge. "Charge!" Elena's rifle jammed on the first pull. She cursed under her breath and dropped to one knee, clearing the chamber while signaling the squad to scatter. Blasts of simulated fire ripped through the mist, forcing recruits into hiding behind fallen logs and rocks. Harris's fury was palpable. He stomped closer to the ridge's edge, yelling contradictory orders. "Advance! Don't pause! Cover! Your teammate!" The squad was a mess. Hesitation rippled through them. Fear, clashing with the instinct to survive. Elena assessed the terrain. The left flank was a swampy ditch. The right was dense thicket. Charging straight across the clearing, as Harris expected, would be suicide. She motioned toward the right. Thompson caught the signal, followed by 3 others, including Martinez. They moved low through the brush, rifles clutched, eyes scanning for movement. Bullets whizzed past. One recruit fell, a simulated casualty sensor registering the hit. Elena dived to shield Thompson, slamming into the mud. Her rifle jammed again. She muttered, clearing it quickly, firing a single shot to force the enemy to duck. It worked. A path opened. The squad moved slowly, carefully. Every instinct Elena had learned over weeks of grueling training now guided her. One misstep could trigger a domino effect of casualties. Harris's orders rang in her ears, but she ignored them. Survival was priority. Then the trap fully revealed itself. The enemy instructors, positioned behind a natural embankment, unleashed a concentrated volley of blank rounds. The squad froze. Harris's yelling grew louder, more frantic, urging them to move straight into danger. Elena's mind raced. She had no choice but to improvise. "Split," she shouted. "Right flank, cover. Left, follow me." She fired a single shot into a low branch, sending it crashing into the enemy's line, breaking their concentration. The squad surged. Thompson took the lead, clearing obstacles ahead, while Elena covered from behind. One recruit panicked and froze in the open. Elena lunged forward, dragging him behind a log just as a blank round whistled overhead. Harris's face turned red with rage. "Private Ramirez," I said straight across. "Follow my orders." Elena ignored him. Orders from a reckless man were not commands that ensured survival. She had learned long ago that instinct and observation outweighed blind obedience. The squad moved through the thicket like shadows, navigating pitfalls, avoiding tripwires, and suppressing enemy fire with tactical precision. Elena's rifle jammed repeatedly, but she adapted, using hand signals, short bursts, and clever positioning to keep everyone alive. Minutes stretched into hours. Sweat stung her eyes. Her palms throbbed, blistered and bloody, yet she pushed through. Finally, they reached a clearing, the enemy stronghold. Sandbags, logs, and simulated minefields sprawled before them. Harris, still screaming from the ridge, had expected the squad to collapse in a chaotic charge. Instead, Elena orchestrated a flanking maneuver. Thompson and Martinez took positions to the left, while she signaled the rest to hold in concealed spots. Using one last rapid clearing of her rifle, she forced the instructors to duck, creating a gap in their defenses. The squad surged forward, quiet but coordinated. Elena moved like a ghost among them, giving silent commands, guiding movements, and correcting mistakes on the fly. Every step forward, every breath, every heartbeat was a balance of calculated risk and raw instinct. Harris's fury reached its peak. He stomped down the ridge, trying to interject, but the squad ignored him. They were no longer following the man who had nearly led them to disaster. They were following Elena. Within moments, the stronghold was theirs. Sensors beeped in succession, signaling successful engagement. Elena's squad had completed the most dangerous stage without losing a single member, a feat Harris had assumed impossible. The whistle blew. Silence fell over this forest. The squad looked at Elena, faces streaked with sweat and mud, eyes wide with awe. She lowered her rifle, exhausted, hands shaking from the constant clearing and strain. Harris arrived at the clearing, chest heaving, face purple with rage. You got lucky. That wasn't skill, it was chance." Thompson stepped forward, voice steady. "No, sir, That was leadership. Ramirez led us. You didn't. Others nodded in agreement, muttering similar acknowledgments. Harris's authority, fragile before, had cracked beyond repair. Elena didn't say a word. She wiped the sweat from her brow, taking a deep breath. Her rifle was battered, her hands raw, but she had proven something beyond physical skill. She had proven that courage, intelligence, and perseverance could overcome even the most calculated sabotage. That night, back at camp, recruits whispered quietly among themselves. Harris sat alone, nursing his bruised ego. Elena remained on the edge of the fire, staring at the glowing embers, thinking of Ina. She pulled the small notebook from her pocket and wrote another letter. Aina, today, they tried to set me up to fail. Harris wanted me to die out there, figuratively speaking. But we made it. Every single one of us. I didn't just survive. I led. They followed. Some of them, even Harris, hate that I succeeded. But that's okay. I didn't do it for them. I did it for me. And for Aina, tomorrow will be worse. He won't stop. But neither will I, not ever. Elena tucked the letter under her pillow. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines. She could hear distant owls and the soft rustle of nocturnal animals. She closed her eyes, letting exhaustion wash over her, but a small smile touched her lips. The broken rifle lay beside her, scarred and useless for conventional firing. Yet it had taught her more than any perfect weapon ever could. Resilience, ingenuity, and leadership born of necessity. Harris would never admit it, but the game had changed. And Alana Ramirez was no longer the recruit with a broken rifle. She was the soldier who had outsmarted, outlasted, and survived the trap. The morning air was thick and heavy with mist, clinging to the pines and damp earth. Every recruit moved cautiously, boots squishing against soaked soil, rifles clutched tightly, eyes scanning the shadows. Today was different. Today, Harris had made it clear, this stage would not tolerate mistakes. Listen up, Harris's voice echoed across the forest. This is it. The final gauntlet. You will advance through the enemy zone, capture the objective, and return to base. Fail, and you fail me, and yourself. He stepped closer to Elena, venom in his gaze. Private Ramirez, you again will take point. Don't screw this up. Elena swallowed hard, feeling the familiar twist of dread in her stomach. Every muscle ached, her hands were blistered, and the rifle she carried was as unreliable as ever. But the fear that had once gripped her now sparked determination. Yes, sir, she replied evenly, refusing to let his anger dictate her composure. The squad moved into position. The terrain ahead was treacherous, narrow ridges, sharp inclines, and sudden drops that could easily dislodge even the sure-footed. Red armband instructors lay hidden, prepared to simulate ambushes at every turn. Harris raised his fist. Move! Immediately, chaos erupted. A simulated hail of gunfire erupted from the ridge above. Recruits dove for cover, scrambling into mud behind fallen logs or under thick brush. The forest came alive with noise, shouts, laughter, simulated explosions, and the relentless crack of blanks. Elena's rifle jammed immediately on the first shot. She cursed under her breath and dropped to one knee, clearing it swiftly. She fired one shot, drawing attention, then gestured sharply to Thompson and Martinez. Flank left. Cover fire. The squad responded instinctively, following her lead. Harris's orders screamed in the background, contradictory and dangerous, but Elena ignored them. Survival and strategy were all that mattered. The first obstacle was a narrow ridge, slick. With rain, one misstep would send a recruit tumbling down. Harris roared for a straight charge, but Elena calculated each movement, leading her squad in single-file formation. balancing speed with caution. Halfway across, a simulated enemy emerged from dense foliage, blasting a torrent of blanks. Thompson froze, rifle trembling. Elena lunged, pulling him low behind a rock just as another volley sprayed past. "Keep moving," she shouted, hands signaling the path forward. The squad followed, adrenaline sharpening every sense. Every sound became information. A twig snapping meant an ambush. A rustle of leaves suggested movement. The smell of smoke indicated traps. Elena was alive in the chaos, the broken rifle forcing her to think creatively with every shot. At the midpoint, the terrain dipped into a shallow ravine. Mud-swallowed boots, roots threatened to trip the unwary. Harris screamed at the squad from above, insisting they follow his dangerous route across open ground. His arrogance was palpable. Elena hesitated, evaluating. To charge straight would be suicide. She gestured to the left, signaling a safer path through the underbrush. Thompson and two others flanked as she covered. One by one, the squad followed. The simulated enemy opened fire again. Elena's rifle jammed repeatedly. She cleared it. Methodically, every movement practiced, every shot timed to distract or mark openings. Her squad responded, moving in sync, covering her, trusting her. The battle through the gauntlet intensified. One recruit slipped into a hidden bog, stuck to the knees. Elena dropped to her stomach, dragging him free, just as a blank round cracked overhead. She offered a nod, urging him forward. No words, just action. Harris's fury boiled over. He stomped closer, berating and threatening. "Private Ramirez, you are costing us time. You will obey." Elena met his gaze briefly, expression calm, voice steady. "I am keeping us alive, sir. That's my duty." Harris's jaw clenched, and he strode past her, muttering curses. But the squad followed Elena's signals now, not his. The pattern was clear. The broken rifle had forced her creativity, and the squad had learned to trust it, and her. Finally, they reached the enemy objective, a small fortified hill with sandbags, dummy mines, and instructors prepared to challenge them. Harris expected a chaotic frontal assault. Elena did not. She crouched, signaling Thompson to circle left, Martinez to hold cover fire, and the rest to fan out. The instructors reacted to their movement, adjusting fire toward the decoy positions. Elena fired one deliberate shot, clearing the chamber, jamming again, to distract the enemy, and her squad surged. The flanking maneuver worked. Sensors beeped in succession as recruits simulated taking out enemy positions. Harris, yelling from the ridge, was ignored. The squad moved as a single unit, coordinated, precise, and effective. Elena's hands shook from exhaustion, fingers blistered and sore from repeatedly clearing the rifle. She fired the final shots needed to secure the position, then collapsed behind a sandbag. The whistle blew. Silence fell over the forest. The final gauntlet was complete. The squad looked at her, wide-eyed, mud-streaked faces filled with exhaustion and awe. She had led them through Harris's trap, through the most dangerous stage of the exercise, and kept them alive. Harris arrived moments later, face red, veins throbbing. You got lucky again," he roared. "This isn't skill. This is chaos." Thompson stepped forward, voice steady. "No, sir. This is leadership. Ramirez led us. You didn't." Others murmured agreement. Harris's authority had crumbled completely in front of the recruits. Elena's shoulders sagged, exhausted, but she allowed herself a small, private smile. For the first time, she felt the weight of her achievement. She had done more than survive. She had commanded, protected, and guided her squad through impossible conditions. That night, around the campfire, recruits spoke quietly, eyes still wide from adrenaline. Harris sat apart, simmering, defeated in a way that words could not fully capture. Elena remained at the edge of the firelight, notebook in hand. She wrote another letter to Aina. Aina, today was the ultimate test. Harris tried everything to make me fail. Dangerous terrain, impossible orders, traps. I faced every obstacle, every threat, every jam of my rifle, and we survived. I led, they followed. I survived. This is no longer about proving myself to him. This is about proving to me that I am capable, even when the odds are against me. Tomorrow, I finish this. I make sure he sees that strength is not in his ego. It is in the courage to act, to think, and to lead. Elena tucked the notebook under her pillow, staring at the fire. Smoke rose, curling into the night. Sky like the trails of battles past. Her rifle lay beside her, battered, broken, and yet somehow symbolic. It had forced her to adapt, to trust instincts, and to discover leadership within chaos. Tomorrow, she would face Harris one last time. And she would not fail. Dawn broke over the forest, spilling pale light across the muddy terrain. The morning was crisp, each breath sharp and biting. Every recruit stirred quietly, boots laced tightly, rifles slung across shoulders. Today, the final exercise would end, and Harris's authority, fractured over weeks, would face its ultimate test. Colonel Harris stood at the edge of the clearing, arms crossed, jaw rigid. His face was a mask of fury and disbelief. Elena approached, rifle in hand, bandaged fingers gripping the stock. She had survived impossible odds before. Now all eyes were on her. Private Ramirez, Harris growled. This is your final task. You will lead your squad through the obstacle course, neutralize the enemy positions, and return. Do not fail. One mistake and you fail, both me and yourself. Elena nodded, masking the fire in her chest with calm composure. Yes, sir. The whistle blew. The forest erupted into chaos. Smoke, simulated gunfire, and shouts filled the air. Elena's squad moved in formation, eyes alert, boots sinking into wet mud. Her rifle jammed on the first shot, as always, but she cleared it quickly, firing a single round to distract the instructors ahead. Harris barked contradictory orders, insisting on a dangerous frontal charge across open ground. Elena ignored him, signaling her squad to flank left through dense brush. Thompson and Martinez understood immediately, leading their recruits with precision. The first ambush hit. Red armband instructors fired from hidden positions. One recruit froze, panic on his face. Elena lunged, dragging him behind a log, shielding him from the blank rounds. Her hands burned from the constant clearing of her rifle, but she didn't falter. Harris's voice thundered from the ridge. You are costing time. Follow my orders, Private. Elena's mind raced. Time and fear were tools Harris wielded, but she controlled her squad. A subtle hand signal, and her team moved silently, dodging enemy fire. Her broken rifle forced ingenuity. Each jam taught her to time movements, to trust instincts, to communicate without words. They approached the central hill, the enemy stronghold. Sandbags, simulated mines, and dummy turrets lined the approach. Harris expected chaos, a frontal assault that would falter. Elena crouched, scanning, devising a plan. Cover fire left. Thompson, Martinez. Distract them, she commanded. The squad moved in perfect coordination, fanning out. Elena fired a single round, jammed, cleared, fired again, drawing attention to the wrong positions. The enemy responded, shifting. Focus, the gap was hers. Elena's squad surged forward, navigating obstacles and clearing sensor zones one by one. Harris's fury boiled over as he yelled, stomping toward them. Private Ramirez, do not think you can outsmart me. Elena met his gaze, voice steady, tone calm. I am keeping my squad alive, sir. That's my responsibility. The squad secured the stronghold. Sensors beeped in sequence, marking successful engagement. Harris arrived, face red, veins throbbing. You got lucky, he spat. This is not leadership. This is chaos. Thompson stepped forward. No, sir, Ramirez led us. You didn't. The others murmured in agreement. Harris's authority, once unquestioned, had crumbled completely. Elena's hands shook from exertion, fingers blistered, rifle battered. Yet her heart swelled with quiet triumph. Weeks of mockery, sabotage, and impossible odds had led to this moment. She had proven herself without shouting, without cruelty, without arrogance. Harris's rage shifted to desperation. He charged toward the squad, attempting to regain control physically. Elena raised her broken rifle, not as a weapon, but as a tool, a symbol of resilience. Her movements were fluid, practiced. When Harris lunged, she sidestepped, leading him into a low, muddy trench. The squad moved in, coordinated, keeping. Harris trapped without harming him, a lesson in control and precision. Elena's gaze met his. No words were needed. She had outsmarted him, survived his traps, led her squad where he had failed. The whistle blew again, signaling the end. The forest fell into tense silence. Recruits stared at Elena, faces wet with sweat and mud, eyes wide with awe. She had not just survived. She had led, protected, and succeeded where Harris had expected. Failure. Harris stood, sputtering, humiliated. His authority had been stripped not by force, but by competence, intelligence, and courage. The recruits no longer looked to him. Their loyalty had shifted irrevocably. Elena lowered her rifle, exhausted, heart pounding. She had done it. Weeks of mockery, impossible exercises, and constant sabotage had culminated in victory. Not personal. Glory, not revenge, leadership. That night, at camp, recruits whispered about the day's events. Harris sat alone, defeated and silent. Elena remained near the fire, notebook in hand. She wrote one final letter to Aina. Aina, it's done. Every test, every trap, every impossible challenge. I survived. I led. Harris will never see me the same way, and the squad trusts me now. Truly. The broken rifle? It taught me more than any perfect weapon ever could. Courage isn't in strength alone. Leadership isn't in orders alone. It's in patience, intelligence, and action when no one else dares. I did it. I made it through. And tomorrow, I will be unstoppable. Elena tucked the letter away. The fire crackled, smoke curling into the night sky like the trails of battles past. Her rifle lay nearby, battered and broken, yet symbolic. A testament to perseverance, creativity, and courage. She had been underestimated, mocked, and tested beyond reason. And yet she had endured, outsmarted, and led. Colonel Harris had trained soldiers, but Elena had proven what it truly meant. To be one. The forest was silent, except for the whispers of the wind through the pines. Elena closed her eyes, exhausted but triumphant. She had taken down the commander, not with bullets alone, not with brute force, with strategy, leadership, courage, and an unbreakable will. The recruits would remember this day for the rest of their lives, and so would Harris. Elena Ramirez, the recruit with the broken rifle, had not only survived, she had triumphed.